everyone, welcome back to Papa's Workshop. Today's topic is inlays, and I want to talk all about the inlays. This video is really just a foundation to be able to get you started, to have some basic settings so that you can have success from the very beginning. If you're using the easel software, there is an app that's available to be able to do your own inlays there. It will not allow you to use the V-bits. Unfortunately, easel currently does not support the inlays using the V-bits, but hopefully, keep your fingers crossed, that may change in the future. I really don't know. But in today's video, I'll be using the VCarve Pro to set up a very, very basic inlay with the pocket as well as the plug to be able to fit it together and explain exactly how I did it and why does it work. One of the things that I want to do today for you also is in the description below, I will put links to 2 different videos that I have done where I use the easel software and created the inlays using their app. And it works really, really well. But today's video is not about using the easel app. It's about using the VCarve Pro with the V-bits to create your inlays. To hold the MDF down, I'm using the Starbond thick glue along with the accelerator. I have a link in the description so that you can obtain a substantial discount. This is one of the best hold down methods that I have found that works extremely well. And the blue tape that I'm using is just any blue tape. It really doesn't matter. I think this actually came from Harbor Freight, but I have used all different types of blue tape and all of them work extremely well with this Starbond glue. I do not ever remember a time when this Starbond glue and the blue tape method of hold down has failed. I have had failures before with other hold down methods, but the blue tape and the glue method has worked extremely well. And all you need to do is just put the tape on the surface of the wasteboard and on the project. The glue goes in between and it holds extremely well. While I was putting this video together, I did some tests using the Xcarve and the easel software just to see what it would look like if I did a inlay with the V-bit. And I ran into some problems along the way. And I want to show you just a few of the outtakes. There's 2 things I want you to see in this little segment on the Xcarve using easel. First is take a look at the tool paths. This router is going back and forth and I think it sees more air time than it does carving time. The second thing, even though I had this held down, look at this. It started moving and that killed the whole project right there and I had to stop. So I completely reset it up and started over with a brand new piece. Now this time I'm using my bump stops to hold it in place and I'm using one of the bump stops flipped over and using it as a hold down. This worked extremely well. I could have saved a whole lot of aggravation if I'd have just used the glue and tape method to begin with. But you have to adapt and overcome, and this was my quick solution, is put the bump stops down and use them as the hold down on this end. I couldn't do anything on that top left quadrant because the actual cutout is going to take up that entire quadrant. So that's the reason for the bump stops below the surface and the regular clamps on the right side. And this seemed to work extremely well and I had success with the carving. You can see in that top left quadrant that it's almost entirely cut away, and that was the reason I could not use any type of clamps on the surface to be able to hold this material down. In the end, it did do a very nice carving of both the pocket and the plug. Unfortunately, it just doesn't fit together. So let's get back to the real world now and use this Fox Alien Vasco and finish taping this project down and start the carving. The best way to use the glue is to actually put it on the tape that's on the wasteboard. That way it stays put, it doesn't move, it doesn't drip. If you do it the other way and put the glue on the project, you have a tendency for it to perhaps run, and that will cause problems. You also notice that the spindle is definitely in the way. Well, the reason being, the computer was on the other side of the shop and it was doing another project. So I could not move the spindle at this point and just had to work with what I had and work around it. But in the end, I was still able to slide the project board right over into position and glue it down. So it is ready to go, and all I need to do is free up my computer and we'll start this project. The bit that I'm using is a 60-degree V-bit. You can use just about any V-bit that you choose to. I'm just using this 60-degree. This is the 1/4" collet that I have pre-set up in the nut. That way all I have to do is just swap out the whole assembly rather than take the collet out each time. At this point, we're up and running, and I'm actually started the carving. The one thing I want you to notice as this is doing the carving is the time that the bit is actually engaged with the material. There's very little air time that it takes moving from one area to another. It spends a majority of its time actually doing the engraving. This is a look at the open builds controller, and you can actually see a pictorial representation of exactly what the bit is doing. I really like this open build controller to be able to use with the Fox Alien, Vasco, and some of the other CNC machines. I want you to pay particular attention to the actual quality of this carving. It is absolutely fantastic. Now this is the exact same bit that I used in the X-carve with the easel as I'm here now with the Fox Alien Vasco and the open build software. This is just absolutely gorgeous. There is no sanding required whatsoever. One of the features that I really like about the open build software is that I can control the feed rate. I can increase this just by sliding this bar up and set it at any speed that I want. So I raised it 20% just to see how the carving would do, and it was doing extremely well with 20% faster speed. Many of you who are regulars to this channel know that I'm a very conservative person, that I don't push these machines, and I can go far faster than what I actually do. But this easily ran 20% faster on the feed rate, and there was absolutely no change in the quality of the cut or any type of problem with the machine. So yes, I can push the machine harder, I just choose not to. And if you look at the end result, this is just now getting to the point where it's finishing, and it's looking extremely well. I like the construction of this Fox Alien Vasco. It does an amazing job. And I absolutely love how this is turning out. And I know with this whole process that this is going to fit together. Now I'm just using one particular set of parameters today. There's a number of different parameters that can be used to be able to make the inlays work. Now this is just finishing at this point, so it's time to be able to get this off of the machine, and we're going to get it cut and set up to show you just how this fits. Now, like I said, I'm using one set of parameters. I'm actually going to change the parameters and do another carving just to show you the difference and how just making a couple of very small changes will change the result of this inlay. Well, the auxiliary waste board is all cleaned up and it is perfect. And look at the actual carving. This is beautiful. Again, no sanding. I'm taking it over to the bandsaw just to cut these two parts in two so that I can fit them together. I also want to cut off all of the surrounding material away from this plug. I realize this isn't the best material to be able to do the inlays, but it certainly works well for a simple test. Now that I've got everything cut apart, now it's time to be able to test this out. So I take the plug and just slide it over and it snaps right into place. Now you notice some space between the two parts. That was by design. When this gets glued in, you actually can use that space and be able to get back to the bandsaw and cut that apart. I took the plug back to the bandsaw and cut the plug in half. You can see how this fits down into the material. You also notice that there's still a little bit of a gap, and a gap would be fine if you're using this for wall art. Now I'm going to change the settings in just a moment and run this same exact carving again with a different setting so that you can see the difference. But for now, I still want to glue it up. Even though I cut it in half, these parts will fit together perfectly, and it will look like an actual carving with the line down through it. But that's okay. This shows just how well that these parts fit together, and what the inlays will look like. The one thing that I haven't shown you is the VCarve Pro yet. So I want to take you over to the software and show you exactly how I designed this and made everything work. And then once that's done, I want to show you the changes that I'm going to make so that this plug will actually fit deeper into the pocket. But for now, I have everything glued up here. I'll let this dry overnight, and then I'll come back and I'm going to use the bandsaw and cut that off to show you the finish. In VCarve Pro, this is where I had set up the file. And you see the LSU in the bottom half, and then this is the mirrored, where I mirrored this horizontally and created a pocket. I want to show you how I did this project and set it up, and I think what I'll do is just start from scratch and do the whole entire project over so that you can see just how really, quite frankly, easy that it is. So right up here, I'll just create a new one. As far as the changes, really don't care about doing this again, so no, I'm not going to save it. And quite frankly, the G code is saved, but I'm going to delete that also, because this was just a test. To begin this job, this is a single-sided job. The width of the material that I had was 5.5 inches, and on the y-axis, it was 5 1/8. And the material was 3/4 of an inch, but really was not an issue because we were not cutting all the way through. And of course, I'm in inches. The 0 position was on the surface, so that is just checked right there. And for this demonstration, I had put this down in the bottom left-hand corner of the material. Oftentimes, when I do the VCarve inlays, I'll use the center, but for this particular job, I went ahead and set it down at the bottom left. This is the standard resolution because we're not doing any type of modeling, and material doesn't really matter. So I just hit OK. The next thing that I did is just grabbed a guideline and pulled it down, and I wanted to be able to set this at the halfway point. And you see that little knob right there, that little node right there. When I was on that, that showed that that is in the center. Over on the text mode, I used the Arial black, and I wanted these letters to be 1 inch high. So all I needed to do was just type out LSU, and I wanted to have this spaced just a little bit. So I typed in my L space S space and the U. And that was really all the letters that I needed. Everything there is set. I'm just going to close this out. I'll highlight my text, bring it right down here into the center of this area. That looks just fine right there. Next step is that I want to make a copy of this. So Control C and then Control V. And that should give me a copy of it. And that copy I'll bring up right into this area. To make the inlays work, you have to be able to mirror this. Come over to this icon right here, click on it, and I want to flip this horizontal. And that gives me now the mirror image. So this is going to be V-carved in, and this, I want the letters to stand up and create a plug. To be able to do that, I need to close this window. I'm going to come up here to the rectangle, and the size of this doesn't really matter that much, but I can come right in here. I think that looks good. That creates my rectangle, and I apply that, close it, and that will be good. This takes care of all the design work that needs to be done. Let's go now over to the tool paths. And there's a lot of different things that we can do with this. But the first thing, I want to set up this one just with the VCarve. This VCarve is going to start out on the surface. So that's going to be 0. And the flat depth, I'm going to take this down to 0.11 of an inch. I want it to go a little bit further down. I'll show you that in a minute. The V-bit that we're using is the 60-degree V-bit. One of the things that you could do is use a clearing tool path. I decided not to do that. I just left it as my V-bit, and that would work just fine. I wanted that 60-degree bit to be able to do all of the work for me. As far as the rest of this, I did not do anything else at all. I just calculated it, and you can see exactly how that's going to work. If I reset the preview, and you'll see exactly what that's going to look like. That's nice, crisp corners. Perfect. So with that done, let's close this out. Let's go back to the 2D mode, and I want to select this one. So I've completed all the work that needed to be for this one. So I have this one highlighted. So now let's move over to the tool paths for this. You need to have this rectangle around here so that it will carve out this material and not the letters. For this, I'm going to use the V-carve again. Now this time I want to start the start depth at 0.02 of an inch. And then as far as the final depth will be at 0.09. And that gives you that 0.11 that we have as a total depth down here. Now with this 0.02, it will not go to the complete bottom of the pocket. And that's okay, because that gives a little bit of space for the glue to be able to squeeze out. Down here, I really don't need anything else. These are the most important settings right here. We have the bit selected. It has to be the exact same bit. Do not switch bits. Do not change to a different 60-degree V-bit. Use the exact same bit. Once that is done, give it a new name, calculate it, and then this is the tool path that is going to run. And you can see how this is cutting down just a little bit to give you that 0.02 for that start depth. Save the tool paths and then open it up in your G-code sender and be able to do that. Now when I save this, I save this with both paths in here, so I could save just one G-code because I'm using the same bit on the same piece of wood. Normally you would have different materials, and oftentimes the plug that you're making is going to be a different thickness as well. But for my purpose with this test, I can put both tool paths into the same file. Once that is completed, then all I need to do is hit this. Since I've already saved it, I'm not saving it again, and it'll ask me to create a name for it, and then I will close that. When you open up the file, you're going to see this display down here, so you're going to be able to see exactly what the bit is going to be doing, where it's cutting, and how it's cutting. When you create this pocket, this comes down at a 60-degree angle and creates this pocket at the bottom. Now what I had done from the surface is I came down 0.11 of an inch. Your glue surface is not down here. This is not your glue surface. Your glue surface is actually this area right here and right here on your inlay. On the inlay itself, if you look in the V-carve Pro, it will have the start depth and it will list it up here. In our case, we use 0.02 for that start depth, and then the flat bottom depth was 0.09. So this is 0.11, 0.11. These two numbers have to add up to this. That's very important. And what you saw was you had a little small pocket down here where any excess glue could be able to go. Now this is perfect for a wall hanging. If you want to do a cutting board, you perhaps want to be able to have this pocket down here, this little cavity, a little bit smaller. Because when you knock on this inlay itself, you don't want the hollow sound. And if you have an airspace down here, then you're going to create a situation where if you tap on the inlay, it'll sound hollow. In addition to that, you run the risk of water and particles and bacteria gathering and getting into this area, and you don't want that. So that's the glue surface right there. Now these measurements can be adjusted depending on what you're doing. This is what I use today to be able to create this inlay, but you can change these numbers and of course change the actual depth to be able to create this pocket. This 60 degrees, you can also change that too. Now for this demonstration today, this was a 60-degree V-bit. Now in the upcoming video, I've ordered a 6.2 degree bit. Now that's still a V-bit, and that will make a much deeper, sharper type of a V-carve and an inlay. And that is what I'm going to be doing in an upcoming video. But for right now, what I want to do is still concentrate on the 60 degree. And for this next test, I'm going to reverse these two numbers. I'm going to have my start depth at 0.09 and the flat depth at 0.02. And what that should do is allow this plug to fit lower into this. Now I'm still going to keep the 0.11. I'm not changing that. You'll find a lot of people that will use 0.2 or something different, but we're not doing that. We're going to keep this at the 0.11. All I'm going to do is reverse these two numbers. We'll have the start depth at 0.09 and the flat depth at 0.02. And I want to show you the result. Don't forget, I'll have another video where I'm using a 6.2 degree V-bit to do an inlay. You're not going to want to miss that. I already have the G-code file set up in here, but just to show you, when you come up here to this little icon, you just click it and you can see open G-code from the file. When I click that, it opens up exactly where I had put it, and this was my test inlay right here. I misspelled. I put LSY instead of LSU, but that's okay. I'm going to delete this and it'll be gone. But it's just as simple as clicking this and opening it, and that file will load. This is a very easy system to be able to run the G-code and be able to control the CNC machine. And this is an excellent, excellent combination of using the open build controller and Fox Alien Vasco. This is a great combination. This machine is the one that I use for all of the small projects that I have. And of course, when I have something that won't fit on this machine, then I'll move over to one of the other CNC machines. But I like this one because it is small, it is very solid and stable, and gives very precise cuts. I let the inlay dry overnight. I wanted that glue completely dry, and at this point I'm just going to use a bandsaw and I'm going to cut off the bulk of this material. I think you're going to be in for a big surprise, because if this is done correctly and the inlay is perfect, when I sand this, you're not even going to see the inlay. It is going to completely blend into the other wood and disappear. Why? Because it's the exact same material. So that is the key to this inlay. The only thing that you're actually going to see is that cut line where I cut the plug in half. That you'll still see. Now there's several ways to be able to remove the rest of this waste material. One, you could use the sander like I'm doing, or you can literally put it back on the CNC machine and just cut it down to the surface. For something this small and just as a test piece, using the belt sander is perfect for it. Now I've almost have it down flush to the surface, and I want to show you the results. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. The sanding now is just about done. It's not 100%, but it's good enough for the purposes of this test. Let's take a look now at these results. What's so interesting about this, because I did not use the contrasting colors, these joints are so perfect. As I sand it down smooth, it blends into absolutely nothing because it's the same material. You can't get any better of an inlay than that. Just wait till we transfer this over to contrasting wood and see the difference. That is absolutely amazing that that is that sharp and crisp of lines. So this test is more than perfect. And I haven't even finished sanding. There's still glue up here. But that's what you're looking for in the inlays, is to have these corners and these curves that perfect. If you can do that with a simple piece of MDF like this, imagine what you can do with really good quality wood. One final test now. I went ahead and used the center this time to be able to set up this last final test. To set up this next one, I want to run through this quickly. I'm going to start out with a brand new file again. Now for this one, we are going to use the single-sided. The width of this is 5.5. This piece of wood is also 5.5 on the y-axis. We'll stay with the 3/4 of an inch thick. Stay in inches. The Z position will be on the surface. And this time I'm going to set this up in the center. And standard modeling resolution. And this all will be okay. Now it's time to bring in the text. So I'll click on the text icon. I want to use the Arial black. I still want the letters to be the 1 inch tall. I'll type in the L space, S space, and the U. And that will take care of it. I'll take this first one. I'll slide it down where it belongs. And that snaps right in position. Now, Control C, Control V, and that gives me a second one. I'll slide it up to this point right there. Next, go over to the mirror icon. Don't forget this. This is critical. Even if you think you have a symmetrical item, please remember, do it anyway. You want to flip this on the horizontal so that you get that mirror image. Please remember this. This is critical. Come to the rectangle icon, put a rectangle on it. Nothing fancy. I think that'll do just fine. We'll apply that and close it. So that takes care of all the elements of the design. Let's go over to the toolpath this time, and we're going to make a couple of changes. On this first one, we'll highlight this, do the V-carve. At this point, this is going to be my 0 start depth. We're going to go down exactly the same as we did before and realize we could change this depth, but I want to be able to keep this as similar as possible to the first one. We're using the exact same bit, so we'll select that. And that was the only other things that we had made, so we'll just calculate this. And you can see exactly how it's going to be coming. And you can see the start point now is at the center. And it'll come down and do the carving just as it did before. All right, let's close this and let's get back into the 2D mode, and we will select this one now. And let's set up this V-carve. Now at this point, we said we were going to reverse the numbers. So my start depth is at 0.09. The flat depth is going to be at 0.02. And same 60-degree V-bit. We're not using the clearance tool. Everything else stays the same. I'm going to come down here and just label this as the plug. And we'll calculate it. You can see how that's going to work. At this point, I'm not going to do any other previews. I just want to save the, you can see that I have both of these carvings listed as one, so that will work just fine. A lot of people ask what post processor I use, and it's just the Xcarve in inches. That works just fine. There's actually several that you could use. So I'll save the tool path now. I'm going to put this in the same folder, and this will be the test. So that will take care of it. We'll save it. We'll bring up the open builds. Now that that's open, I've got the machine in the homing process. And don't forget, I'm using a center point to be able to carve this project, not the bottom left corner. With the homing cycle completed, I went ahead and moved the machine over to that center point. Once I have it dead center in the project material, I'll set the X and the Y position to 0, and then I will Z the machine. Now in this case, rather than using the probe, I'm going to use just a plain piece of paper to set the Z height. I always like to try and show you different methods to be able to accomplish the same thing, because in your shop you may not have the probe, or you may not have seen how to be able to Z the machine with the paper before. But either way, I always try to be able to be a little bit creative and show you the different ways to do the same process. Now I've loaded the G-code into the computer. You can see what it's going to look like. You can see the center point right here. All right, at this point we are all ready to be able to start the carving. I have my X, Y, and Z all set to 0. And of course I did raise the Z axis just slightly, and that's okay. That way I could get the paper out from under it. The G-code is all loaded, so let's go ahead and start the carving. Now because you've already seen this once, I'm not going to show all of this carving again. All I'm going to do is just show you that yes, it's running, and let's skip to the end and see the actual results. Again, this cut looks absolutely fantastic. I'm going to flip this over, and it just, when you get a line, it drops down nice and solid, and you can see that this is a very, very thin line this time. Now that I know that this fits really good, I'm going to cut this in half again and show you how it goes much deeper into this pocket. Now I took and just cut this in half, and I'll take this now and drop it in place, and you can see how it goes much, much deeper down into this pocket. And that's what you want if you're doing a cutting board, because that way when you put the glue in, that glue will be able to still be on each side. It still has a very slight pocket, but you're not going to get any of the echoing and hollow places. That whole entire gap will be filled. So this is an absolute perfect inlay for a cutting board type of situation. Okay, there you have it, folks. An easy, quick tutorial on exactly how to do the inlays. Using a VCarve desktop or the VCarve Pro, either one will do a great job on setting up the tool paths that you need. The most important thing is to be able to remember that when you're using the V-bit, use the same bit to create the pocket as well as the plug. Very, very important. And number 2, that start depth is critical. And the start depth plus the flat depth must equal the depth of your pocket. If you can remember that, you're well on your way to being able to have very successful inlays for your project. And as I showed you when I sanded off that one, if it sands down with the similar material and you can't even see the inlay, then you've got a perfect inlay. Just think what that would look like if you had the contrasting wood. And guess what? I'm going to be showing that in some upcoming videos. Now I know this video wasn't showing you all beautiful and pretty inlays, but it wasn't designed to. This video was designed to give you the techniques and the tips to be able to have successful inlays. So if you like this video, by all means, give me that thumbs up. And don't forget, just hit that subscribe button. And I look forward to seeing you on the next video. So for now, bye-bye.